You're listening to Last Word Radio, where you get the last word.
Welcome to the Fourth Line Podcast, part of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. This is September the 2nd, 2019. With you today is myself, Carl, and Stevie Nick.
What up, Carl?
It's Labor Day. September's here. You know what that means, Nick?
No.
It means that hockey happens this month. It's preseason games, but I'll take it.
Half of which aren't even televised.
Most of them aren't televised. Most of them aren't against like actual NHL rosters.
Correct.
I was looking at the schedule today to see when teams are starting up. It looks like about like the 15th of September, so we got about 2 more weeks until preseason games start. But it's like we're playing a split squad game. We're playing against this university. It's
also we're playing in this city you've never heard of.
Yeah, Regina. Where is that? No one knows.
Regina.
No,
sounds like it's in Alabama.
They're not playing hockey in Alabama. The NHL makes some questionable scheduling decisions sometimes, but that's not it.
Imagine just like, oops.
But there's 2 Reginas?
You booked a game. What did we say last week? It's a husband and wife who does the scheduling? Honey, yeah. You booked a game in Alabama? Oh, I thought it would be a nice vacation for us.
Yeah, I've never been. Let's go.
No, Regina's in Saskatchewan. I know that.
Yeah. But anyways, games are getting started up here, which also means that it's time for our summer series to come to an end. You know, the kids are heading back to school. Everyone's summer vacations are ending. It's sad for some of us.
Yeah, but no one's lamenting the past anymore.
It's
the
true.
Focus is on the future.
We're moving ahead, and so we're going to stop looking at the past next week. Today is the last episode in our Hardcore Hockey History series in the summer. Triple H, it's happening.
Time to play the game.
And one thing that I found very interesting, we have a great guest on this week. What?
You're holding some cards in front of your camera.
I am, yeah.
And I'm curious about what you're going to do with them.
We'll get to those. We have Mike Commito on. We have Mike Commito on today. We have a great conversation about hockey history. He is the hockey historian for the Sudbury Wolves. He also has a book all about hockey that you can and should read called Hockey 365. So do that. But I was cleaning the house this weekend, as one does on the Labor Day weekend, and I came across this game called Sports Quiz, which is what you see in my hand. And I started flipping through, and I'm torn if it's the fact that like I know hockey more than I know other sports, or the fact that these questions are shockingly easy. So I pulled out some of the NHL questions because this game covers NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and the NFL.
Okay.
So
and with a very generic name, Sports Quiz.
It is called Sports Quiz. It also came with a very generic blank pad of paper to keep score.
Oh, great.
And this is one I don't get. It came with a pencil, but it's a mat. Like it's a giant match.
Oh, yeah.
Not sure why. Anyways, the giant match is an eraser. So here we go.
Okay.
For the record, I got all but one of these correct. We're not going to go through all. I have 8 questions in my hand.
Oh, boy.
We'll go through 4 of them.
I'm under so much pressure right now.
I'm going to put some of one of the ones that I got wrong is going in here for you.
Okay.
In what year did the Miracle on Ice take place?
1980.
Boom. You don't see. Here's the thing. These are multiple choice. You didn't even need it.
There's options.
I was like, oh, Nick's gonna get this one. Here's another one. Which team has won the most NHL championships? I'm not giving you the options on this one either.
Les Canadiens de Montréal.
There you go. Which one of these NHL teams are not one of the original 6? Philadelphia, Chicago, Boston, and the New York Rangers.
The Philadelphia Flyers.
There you go. You're 3 for 3, and you don't even need the multiple choiceness of it. Here we go. Now it's going to get a little harder, Nick.
Okay.
What father and son became the first to both win an NHL MVP award?
Ooh, an NHL MVP. Wait, What does MVP mean, though? Is it Conn Smythe or is it
regular season?
Okay.
Do you need the options?
I don't want them because I feel like it'll become clear if I hear the options. So father, is that right?
Oh, it will. Yeah.
Okay. So father-son duo to win. I don't think it's the Howes because I don't think Mark Howe ever won an MVP. I'm going to say the Hulls.
You are correct. Bobby and Brett Hull. The other options are Gordy and Mark, Daryl and Brett Sutter, and and Peter and Paul Stastny. So, yeah, right? Here we go. Who was the first player to win the Stanley Cup as the captain of two different teams? Do you need the options?
Yeah, that one isn't jumping out to me immediately.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Mark Messier, Joe Sakic, Jean Beliveau.
I got it.
E. Carbonneau.
Mark Messier.
It's not the guy who only ever played for one team. I mean, technically he played for the Nordiques. Technically that's a thing too. But all right, here's the question that I shouldn't have told you this is the one I got wrong. This is the one I got wrong. This is
Okay.
This is it right here. Who was the last NHL player to play without a helmet?
Who was the last? Oh, you know what? I know the answer to this. Can you read me the options?
Yeah, and actually, I probably could have guessed it, but by looking at it, it highlights in red the answer. Here are our options: Craig McTavish, Ron DeGay, Bobby Clark, and Rob Blake.
Okay, none of those are the guy I thought it was. I think it's Craig McTavish.
Nick is on fire, ladies and gentlemen.
Is that true?
It is true.
Craig McTavish, now the head coach of some European team.
Probably.
Who knows? They may have just buried him under that old arena.
Yeah. The other two questions that I pulled out: who holds the record for most goals in one NHL season?
I don't know, Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, and what is the most points scored in an NHL season?
Most points scored in an NHL season? I have no idea. Not off the top of my head.
Your options are 215, 212, 204, and 199.
Shoot, I was thinking it can't be over 200. 212.
It's 215. You had to get one wrong eventually, Nick. There it is.
Who scored that many points in a season?
That would be Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, as I asked that, I realized it was a stupid question. I was like, based on the last answer I gave, it can only be one.
Yeah, there's some guys out there who are pretty good. Anyways, congratulations, Nick. We're going to get into more sports history, but first we're going to talk about some of the news of the week. We're also going to let you know about Park Power. ParkPower.ca is your place to go for your energy needs in Alberta. Park Power is great because they are an energy supplier. They can take care of your needs as good, nay, better than anyone else in Alberta can. However, they also will support charities, not just will, but do support charities in your community. And you get to pick which one. So you can have that say, which makes it a great way to interact with your energy company, something that I've literally never thought I ever wanted. But now we have that. So head to parkpower.ca, a great supporter of the Alberta Podcast Network, and my favorite place to get my utilities from. You know what is a great thing to do, Nick?
What's that?
Avoid NHL work stoppages.
That is a good thing, Carl. And we're halfway there.
We're halfway to delaying it for another season is what we're almost at. Which, I'll take it.
With the history of NHL work stoppages, that's a plus for us.
Yeah. We didn't do NHL work stoppages, did we, this summer? Because it would just be sad.
Yeah, no. No, but we should have reached out to Gary Bettman and be like, hey, look, we're doing this segment called Hockey History. We need a guest to talk about NHL work stoppages.
Yeah, you know a lot about them.
Yeah. We only want the experts.
Alas, we do not get that. But what we do get, so the NHL and the NHLPA both have out clauses in this CBA, which means that either of them could trigger this CBA to end at the end of this season. The NHL did not. They said, we're happy. And I'll get to what their actual wording was shortly. it means that the NHLPA has until September 15th to do the exact same thing.
2 weeks.
2 weeks today for them to either give us an extra year until it happens or to call it, and we could have a work stoppage pretty soon. But the NHL seems quite happy with it at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't be. The league's doing great.
Yeah. Well, and that was their actual, that's what they said, right? Based on the current state of the game and the business of the game, the NHL believes it is essential to continue building upon the momentum we have created with our players, and therefore will not exercise its option to reopen the CBA. Which has got to mean the NHL is doing pretty dang good financially. If old Gary Bettman's not using whatever tricks he can to do this. This is the players' CBA.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what the league is trying to make clear. Like, hey, anything happens this time, it's not us. We like where we are. We want to keep going. So if there is a work stoppage, it would not be a lockout. It would be a strike. Correct?
Correct. At this point in time, that is what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. How many of the previous work stoppages have been lockouts for strikes? Do you know?
I do believe was the 94-95 one. That was a strike, was it not?
I think that one was a strike. And then the other two were lockouts.
So according to the internet, 92 was the strike. 94-95 was a lockout. The lost season was a lockout, and the shortened season. So we've had 2 shortened seasons, an entirely lost season, and 1 strike.
Okay. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think the players are going to do?
I think this is going to happen.
What do you mean? What's going to happen?
Sorry. I think that the players are. I don't think we're going to lose games. I do think that the players very well could make this CBA end a year early, simply as a negotiating tactic.
Which would be at the end of this season coming up.
At the end of this season, yeah.
Right.
The only reason that I think that I could see that happening is because we have the new team in Seattle coming, and you want to make the NHL and their $550 million investment. I guess someone's invested in them. They're now, have a responsibility to that organization. Because you know what'll make them fail? Not playing games. That would make a franchise suffer. So I think with that happening, with Seattle happening, the players can use that as a tactic. The NHL clearly doesn't want this to happen. And if you say, all right, well, we're going to make it happen a year sooner, you don't get this sweet deal you want for another year. They could be using that as a negotiating ploy. I do not think that I see this happening and going to a strike.
I don't think so either. I think the players are going to reopen it at some point, whether it's this year or next year. I think that's coming, just because they obviously have some issues. But I kind of agree. I think the stakes are a little too high at this point in time to miss games.
For sure. And the difference between this and some of the other ones, Don O'Fair, the head of the NHLPA, has a long history with Major League Baseball, and has done a fair amount. So he is used to this. He was part of the strike with baseball. So if they want to strike, he's certainly willing to. But baseball had a lengthy period of labor peace after that strike, right? They haven't had anything. It's been 24 years since the strike in baseball. And I think that he's able to take them into that direction. Players obviously know what they want. They want to be playing. They don't make money if they stay home. It's not like the owners where they can say like, well, we lose money if we go on the ice with this.
Yeah.
No one makes money if the players stay home. So I think that's kind of tips the scales a little bit.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that.
So is there anything, as of right now, obviously there's a lot of things. Is there any sense that you get of like what could be the things that are going to push the players in one direction or the other, or what they're looking for to this CBA?
Well, I think it's all around escrow, right? Like they want less of their cash tied up in escrow. I think that's going to be the sticking point. And then I think the other thing they're going to want thrown in is the Olympics. But I don't think the Olympics is like a sticking point that they'll strike over. But the money, it's all about the Benjamins.
It is. And certainly escrow, for those who aren't, every time we get into escrow, I need to like re-look up what escrow is.
I know, me too.
Essentially, what escrow is the league says the players get like X percentage of the money, right? Whether it's 50%, 48%, whatever hockey-related revenue is there, that happens. So they set the salary floor and the ceiling, right? The cap and the floor, and teams have to be within that. Now, with teams being in that gives a bit of randomness, and so salaries aren't necessarily representative of that given percent. So the league takes back some player money because they're like, look, we can't be that responsible with our money to keep it at that percentage. So we're going to take some of your salary we gave you. We're going to keep that, and we'll give you some back if we're actually at that percentage. So that's what that means.
Right.
And it's huge. It's 18%, I believe, is the current escrow.
It's high.
So it's, you pay your taxes, and we know that we're tax experts here. You pay your taxes, then you pay your escrow, then you're paying, your agent, your team behind you, you're paying your whatever's, there's a lot of things coming out. Fees.
You got to buy mansions. You got to buy cars, all the things that rich people do.
You got to buy dinners.
You got to buy dinners.
Yeah. Dinners aren't cheap.
No, not when you're playing credit card roulette with a team of 20 guys.
I mean, if you're on the Flames, it's fine because you're only going to Moxie's. Like, it's not like you're going somewhere nice. You're going to Moxie's and you don't have to pay for Dougie Hamilton's dinner. So that's great. So that's good news for them.
Such a burn out of left field on Moxie's. Like, what did Moxie's ever do to you?
It's not very good.
I agree. It's not great.
No one is like, hey, do you want to go for dinner? Yeah, I do. Do you want to go to Moxie's? Let's go somewhere else.
Yeah. Do you want to go somewhere overpriced for the quality of food and drink that you get?
Do you want to go somewhere generic and the same as everything else? Yes, I do, actually. Like, I'd rather go to a Boston Pizza than a Moxie's because I'm not paying the prices, but I'm getting the same level of food.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we could agree on that.
Good news. We can go for team dinners.
Yeah. Fourth Line Podcast brought to you by Moxie's.
No, Boston Pizza.
Boston Pizza.
Not Moxie's.
Not Moxie's.
I'd rather go to a museum than go to either of them, though, if I'm being honest.
You got a better sandwich at a museum than at Moxie's.
Yeah, there's usually like a coffee shop at the front or outside.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do that. So, anyways, so CBA, we'll find out September 15th. So in 2 weeks, we'll find out. Tune in here. This will be the place. It's going to be only a day later. We'll be here to give you the fresh takes.
Yep.
Other things happened this week.
Like what?
The entire Carolina Hurricanes retired.
All of them.
Every single one. So we'll start with the first one because it's a, 24, 25 man roster. We've got a lot to go through. Number one, Cam Ward signed a 1-day contract. I'm not sure. Do you pay escrow on a 1-day contract?
Knowing the NHL, probably.
I was like, look, you're taking $5. Like that's a healthy tip.
Yeah. And no Tom reason. Dundon's like, done. That's my coffee for the week.
Yeah, exactly. So Cam Ward signed a 1-day contract to retire as a member of the Carolina Hurricanes. It is a little sad now knowing that he was there, that he wasn't able to just like end his career there, that there's like just that one weird season where he left. But Cam Ward,
I mean, he got paid for it.
He did, yeah. Minus 18% though. What will be your memory of Cam Ward? Will you remember him as the Stanley Cup winner with Carolina, or this like weirdly mediocre goalie who?
I will only remember Cam Ward as having that amazing Stanley Cup winning season and playoffs.
Well, is part of that because of the role that the Wings were in that kind of realm?
That was what year was that they won?
That was 2006. If we're going with 20s, 2006.
2006 was the year he won the Stanley Cup. He played 23 games and had a .920 save percentage in the playoffs. In the regular season, he played 28 games and had an .882 save percentage.
That's pretty good.
Talk about relying on your goalie to get hot in the playoffs to win the cup. Boom, there's your case study. And he won the Conn Smythe Trophy, if I'm not mistaken.
As a rookie, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And that, that's peaking early, right? We can look at Matt Murray in Pittsburgh to know just how that can go. But as a 21-year-old coming into the league, winning the Conn Smythe, certainly something that will cement him as a legend in Carolina for quite some time.
Yeah. And then outside of that, he was perfectly average, I think. Like he had one season where he had a plus .920 save percentage.
Yeah. And that was 2011, 2010, 11.
Yeah.
He was always kind of like good enough. He was never the guy, but there wasn't a lot of support around him in Carolina for those seasons.
Yeah. No, I agree. They were not great teams. They allowed the opposition to just rock them like hurricanes.
Nick. But yes. But they did. Yeah. I have no comments on this right now.
No, we should move on. Just let that live on. And
the Justin Williams, he also retired. His was a very different approach to it. Cam Ward like officially retired. Justin Williams said he's taking a break.
Yeah.
So he's not signing to start the season, but he's not ready to fully come out. He says, it's important to me that the focus of attention is on the current very talented group in Carolina, or that the Carolina Hurricanes have assembled as they prepare to build on the momentum we established last season. And it's time for a break.
So you're just like, I'm tired.
Like I might
need to
come
put
back.
my feet up for a bit, and then I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to watch how this first half of the season unfolds, see who pulls ahead. Maybe I'll sign with them.
See if we're good. Maybe make one last run at a Stanley Cup. I don't want to play a full season if it means I'm not going to make the playoffs and make a Stanley Cup run, though.
But here's the thing about that, though. If you're not going to play in the first half of the season or the first 3 quarters of the season, how do you expect to be ready to play in the NHL? Like with teammates and opposition who have been at peak performance all year. How do you expect to just like jump in?
Well, Nick, you may not know this, but at the ripe old age of 37, soon to be 38 years old when the season starts, Justin Williams is in prime physical shape because he has Rod the Bot as his coach. So he's been taking notes, he's been learning, and he's ready.
I think both him and Rod Brandamore should both return to the ice together this year, and then we'll get our player coach.
See, I think what should happen is he's a huge part of that team, huge part of that organization. He should join the coaching staff. I think that'd be great, a real benefit for the team. And if and when he decides to lace him up again, stay on as a coach, and we do get a player coach.
Oh God, what's going to happen the day on the show we get a player coach?
Like this is our best shot, is it not? Is Justin Williams not our best shot right now?
I think it might be if they see the value of making him a coach, bringing him on as part of the coaching staff. And you know what, Carl? I'll take it if it's just like video coach or like one of those guys who like ticks all the shots that are taken. That counts.
I don't care what kind of coach he is. He doesn't need to be on the bench. He doesn't even have to be in the building.
Yeah.
He can just come for home practice coach.
If the word coach is in his title, I'm claiming it.
Yeah. Power skating coach, Justin Williams.
Yep. Absolutely. Player coach. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I kind of think that he'll just be done.
I agree. Yeah. And it's a weird way to just go about it, to kind of be wishy-washy. And he's never fully committed. And it seems like the last couple of years, he's kind of been on that brink, and here we are. It's time to step away, but not retire. So
like, I kind of get it. He's played 19 seasons. It's hard to just turn and walk away completely. But I think that once he, gets into October and he's relaxing and he's not traveling and sleeping well and getting used to not having to go to the gym every day, trust me, it's really nice.
I've been doing it for 31 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great life to live. I think he'll probably realize that he doesn't want to go back.
Yeah. Likewise, when this show goes into entering its 19th season in existence, and we decide to finally hang it up, it'll be a hard decision, but we'll enjoy it later.
Yeah, hang up the mics. What a career, though, eh? He said it like when you think about like hockey legends or NHL legends, the name Justin Williams doesn't really jump to the top of your head. But
there's always those guys, right? Like I found myself thinking about it somewhat often. I was just like that player that's around the league, never a star, never like a top player, but manages to get like a 19-year career out of him.
Yeah, and like the amount of like he's won what, 3 Stanley Cups?
A Conn Smythe. He's known as Mr. Game 7. Wait, did he score the game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup game that the Hurricanes won, that Cam Ward won the Conn Smythe in? He may have. There's only one way to find out.
There is.
We should have asked our hockey historian when he was on.
He was. Doesn't seem like the kind of history he'd have on the top of his head.
You were saying, though.
Yeah, I just thought it was a cool tie into the Cam Ward thing. But it's like, what a great career for someone to retire on. Like, I don't think he should have any hesitation to walk away and feel like he hasn't done something.
Oh, for sure. Right? Especially like so many people retire without having won the Stanley Cup. Right? He's done it multiple times. He's literally won the award as the most valuable player in the playoffs. There's not a whole lot more for him to do.
So 1,244 regular season games, 312 goals, 786 points, 3 Stanley Cups, 1 Conn Smythe trophy. I'm not familiar with his international accolades, but I don't think he was on any of the recent Olympic teams. Hall of Fame?
No.
I don't think so either.
No, I would say no. The game-winning goal in the Carolina Hurricanes Stanley Cup, František Kaberle, brother of Thomas.
Hey, at least the Kaberles did something.
He scored the empty netter in that game.
Oh, okay.
So he did score. But yeah,
so
one of the Kaberles had success.
Well, there you go. I got nothing else on Justin Williams.
That's what I think we've covered. Justin Williams, we covered Cam Ward. The rest of the Hurricanes, as we know, have not yet retired. But
they will.
There's still time.
Yeah, they will eventually.
True, yeah. And there's 2 weeks left until game starts, so we'll see what happens to that organization in the meantime. You never know. Sebastian Aho, after having his offer sheet matched, might just be like, you know what? I'm done. I'm Andrew Lucking this.
Yeah. I'll take my bonus, please.
Yeah. When did my bonus got paid? July 1st? I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to our chat with Mike. Mike, as we mentioned, author, historian, all around great guy. Let's do it. Welcome back, everyone. We are very excited to have with us today Mike Commito, author of the book Hockey 365, historian of the Sudbury Wolves, many other things. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So as we kind of wrap up our summer looking at hockey history, we've touched on, what, Nick, half dozen, 10 different topics this summer?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about hockey history. And now we have a real historian on.
We figured, you know what? We won't do that at the middle or the beginning. We'll wait till the end. It's very excited to have you here today. What exactly is it that a hockey historian does? Because I know it's probably not what Nick and I have done this summer.
Well, that's the thing is I didn't know about these hardcore hockey history segments you guys were doing until Nick invited me on. So now I've got a lot of listening and catching up to do, which is great though, because I'm always looking for new stuff to listen to at on the way to work or on the run or on a run. So I will definitely go back and check out all those segments. But no, I'm glad. Appreciate you guys having me on to kind of close out the hockey history this summer. I think for me, what a hockey historian does is really not that much different from any kind of what any historian does. And so, again, the duty of a hockey historian or an environmental historian, which is what I was in a past life, we can get into that a little bit later, or we don't have to get into that. The historian's job is to just study, analyze the past, and interpret what had happened in the past. On the hockey history level, though, I think that, in my position with the Wolves or when I'm doing other hockey history writing is, especially with the fan base, is to try to bridge the gap between different eras of fans. If you look at the Sudbury Wolves, this is a team that's been in the OHL now for almost 50 years. You've got the fans that remember, the heyday with Mike Foligno and Randy Carlyle and Ron Duguay and all those guys. And then now you've got some, the fans in the middle, and then the new fans that are coming out in the new era. We've had a little bit of a resurgence the last year or so with, Jukka-Pekka Luukkonen and Quinton Byfield, especially this year going into his draft year. So like my job, or at least the way I try to conceptualize my job, is to tell stories that'll try to link together those different generations of fans. And so trying to celebrate the team's past, what it's done, in the past, and kind of celebrate its heritage, but also at the same time tell stories that will kind of draw the attention back to what's happening on the ice. And so obviously, the Wolves had a great season last year, so it's really easy, I think, as a historian to tell those stories when the team is doing well. It's obviously a little more challenging, to be working with a club when the product on the ice is suffering a little bit, because again, people don't necessarily want to look at the good old days. They want to see, what are you doing for me lately, right? But for me, I've been fortunate with my role with the team in the last year. That obviously was a great season last year, hoping to build on that this year and hopefully to tie in some more of those stories from the past. I think one of the things that if people had followed my role with the Wolves last year, I try to just kind of tell the stories that connect with fans from across generations. But this year, I'll kind of be taking not a step back, but we're going to be focusing more on core projects. So one of the things that the team wants to do in the next few years, while they're still in the old arena downtown, is to retire a few more numbers. And so those are some projects that I'm going to be working with the team on, who should be going up to the rafters, engaging with the fans on who they want to see go up there. How are we going to do that? Tell some stories around that whole thing, going back and looking at that player's past, and getting that kind of look back. And then obviously, as I mentioned earlier, with Byfield going into his draft year, I think it'd be great to kind of profile him and, do a little bit of his history, where he came from, talk to some people that are close with him and really kind of set things up for what could hopefully be the highest Wolves player ever to be drafted to the NHL.
So, Mike, I want to get into how you got that job, but you mentioned the jersey retirement, and I'm kind of curious, like, how else does what you do as a historian like manifest itself with the fans? Like, what you talk about interacting with the fans? Are you talking about like, writing blog posts or articles? Are you talking about like an area in the arena where you have stuff on display? Like, how does that kind of come to life?
Yeah, so the team doesn't necessarily have an area in the arena where we kind of showcase the team's history. That would be something that I would like to do at some point. It's just a matter of, finding the time and I think seeing what that would look like. But ultimately, right now, the interaction, the way that I engage with the fans is, I try to do it on social media and try to source some ideas from them on what they want to see. And then primarily, it's through those articles that live on the team's website. So again, kind of seeing who would we want to kind of showcase. And I think that's the other thing, that's the other duty of the historian too, is obviously not only just engaging with the fans, which is a huge reason why, you have those historians to celebrate the team's heritage, but it's also to engage with the alumni. And I think that at the OHL level, where you have such high turnover, where you have guys that are, maybe only there for a half season, or they're there for 2 years, 3 years, and then they're gone. And not all of them go on to have professional hockey careers. Some of them go on to play SAS hockey. Some of them go over to play in Europe, but they don't all go on to have NHL careers. And so I think it's important for me, as a team historian for an OHL club, is to celebrate those players that don't all go on to have hockey careers, because they go on to contribute to society in different ways. And I think it's important to kind of celebrate what they did with the club, because even though they may not have gone on to have an all-star NHL career, they might have been a part of huge moments for the club locally, and the fans don't forget that. And so I think it's important that we remember those guys as well and highlight their stories and, kind of see where they're at right now. Because again, with all of that turnover, it's kind of hard to keep tabs on all those players at the junior level. And so I think that's, especially, and you kind of see that at the NHL level, where I think a lot of the historical outreach that teams do is ultimately kind of paired with an alumni group, and to kind of because obviously the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, and you mentioned with the new arena, I got to experience here in Calgary when they closed down the Corral, not where the Hitmen currently play, but where they used to play, where the Flames used to play, and kind of celebrating that history. Really seeing how well the fans connected with that. That was a sold out game in there, ton of fun, all around refocused on the history of the Hitmen. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited for you next year with the Wolves moving to a new arena.
Well, it won't be next year. It's probably the Wolves will be in the downtown arena for at least 3 more years. There's a bit of some controversy here locally about the new placement of the arena. So probably I would say 4 or 5 years from now. But that will be a fun exercise, is to take, I think, the opportunity to sell to what there's a lot of history in that old barn downtown. It was built in 1951, so it's been there for quite a while. There's a lot of hockey history in there outside of the Wolves as well, right? So I think there's a great opportunity to take the history from that old arena and bring it to the new arena whenever that happens, and kind of hopefully do some more interactive displays and things like that. Also, I think the big challenge for the team is just there's certainly a campy, kitschy vibe that you get if you go to the Sudbury Arena. If you guys have ever been there, and for the listeners that have been there or haven't been there, they've got this taxidermic wolf that they have basically on a clothesline. Whenever the Wolves score, this thing kind of just goes right out across the ice, and it goes further out. It just basically stops over top of the visitors' bench and just kind of taunts them, and then they retract it, and it goes back into the corner of the arena. It's been there since basically since the team kind of started in the 70s. It used to be on a manual clothesline, and somebody would sit in the corner in a lawn chair, and every time they would score, he would have to get up and kind of shimmy it across the ice and then bring it back. Now it's automated. They have it on a button, but it's stuff like that where you hope that the team embraces that, though, even though it's going to be a state-of-the-art brand new facility in 2022 or 23, that they bring that old wolf with them, because so much of I think when you go to the Sudbury Arena for the first time and you see your first Wolves game, that's the draw. That's the thing that people remember, is that stuffed wolf in the rafters.
I don't even know what to say about that. I've never heard anything like that before.
Oh, you got to check out a game. It's like that's I always say that when you see kids go to the Wolves game for the first time, that's always the draw, is you see them looking up at that thing as it comes out across the ice. And I mean, even me, I've been there. I can't even count how many times I've seen a Wolves game, and it still doesn't lose its charm, at least for me personally. That's the highlight of the game is checking out that thing. And obviously that means the Wolves are scoring, so that's a good sign.
That's hilarious.
Well, and hopefully, like you said, hopefully that makes its way to the new arena, because I have seen it, and it is something to behold.
Yeah, I've made it clear, in those discussions that that's something that has to go. Not that I have a lot of pull or sway in the organization, but obviously that would be the hill that I die on. That raggedy old wolf has to go to the new arena.
Be a shame if it didn't.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about how you came into this job with the team? Like, it's such a unique position. How did this whole thing come about?
Yeah, so it's it kind of goes back, like, before I got the gig with the Wolves, which was last May of 2018. I'd been writing quite a bit of hockey history here and there for everywhere. I'd done some stuff. I'd started off blogging, did some like a weird mashup of hockey history and Canadian history on my blog, on my personal website, where I would take an anniversary in Canadian history and then kind of sandwich some NHL previews in between. It was a weird Frankenstein thing that, probably only my mom read, but then got some other opportunities to do that, for the Kings through the Royal Half, where it was, again, a California history mashup, which again was really weird, but I appreciate the guys for letting me try to, experiment with that. And then from there, just kind of got some more writing opportunities here and there. So I think I established myself, at least locally, as somebody who was interested in hockey history. And so initially I'd approached the Wolves probably 3 or 4 years back now, to try to pitch them on a 45th anniversary book, which obviously 45 years doesn't really have quite the ring as a 50th anniversary book. So the 50th anniversary is coming up in 2022. So at the time I was just kind of really excited to try to find some new opportunities as a up and coming hockey historian. So I figured, why not? We'll try to pitch them on the 45th book. Obviously, I think, common sense prevailed. It's like, maybe we should kind of hold this for a few years and do it for 50. But in the meantime, the conversations kind of continued. And they were we were trying to get them to sign up to, kind of back the book and kind of be a part of that process. But I think as the conversations progressed, we realized that ultimately the book project could proceed on its own, and it is. I'm writing that book now with two colleagues and friends, Mark Kohlberg and Scott Miller. But in the meantime, the team, I think, wanted, a more, clear return on investment, right? So rather than investing in a book that's not going to come out for, 4 or 5 years at the time when we first approached them, that bring me on in this capacity as a historian and develop those pieces that could live, online and ultimately help to try to engage the fans. And so that's really kind of how it came about. It was just through, discussions that had taken a few years to develop. And I think it was kind of one of those things where I'd been writing for other places and kind of keeping my eye on NHL history. And, all this time was just kind of one of those moments where it's like, why haven't I reached out to the local OHL team here? Like, this is the highest level of hockey we have in Sudbury. Like, obviously have a rich tradition here in the town. That's something where maybe I should have reached out to them a few years back, but ultimately it kind of all came together. And it's been a great, I think, working experience and learning experience, kind of having the opportunity to write for them regularly, over the last year. And now, especially, I'm really excited about more, not necessarily behind the scenes, but I think there's something that'll be cool about working and doing the legwork, to get some other numbers go up into the rafters, like I'd mentioned with those retirement projects.
With that, I don't know how much you can or even how far you are down that process, but when it comes to an OHL team, like you said, there's a lot of, I find, the players who are fan favorites for major junior team in Canada are not necessarily the guys that go on to great NHL success. What kind of process does it take to, decide who's going to have their jersey retired?
Yeah, so we were initially, I think, targeting to try to do one this year, but I think it's going to be too tight given the timelines that we're going to really try to focus on the 2020-21 season. Those 20s are always going to be tricky to met now that you're having to say two.
It's terrible. I'm already looking forward to that decade being done.
Yeah, I hate it. But I could tell you that this past November, the team retired Rod Schutt's number, which I think was long overdue. Schutt had the record, for most goals in a season. He scored 72 in his big year with the club in 75, 76. And so he kind of joined, Mike Foligno, Randy Carlyle, Ron Duguay, some of the other guys from his high-flying era. And so I think that was kind of something that had been long overdue. And I think the club made that decision, in-house, internally, that this was going to be something that was going to happen. Whereas in past years, when they've retired other guys like like Foligno and Duguay, they actually did fan votes. And so I don't know if the team is going to open it up necessarily to a ballot. I like the idea of if you want to engage fans with history, having a vote is a great way to do it, right? You may not necessarily get the answer you're looking for, but ultimately I think that's a great way to source some ideas from the fans, make them feel invested in the process. Ultimately, I think there's a way to do it so that you're not going to get, we've seen in other fan voting processes that ultimately go a little sideways, that I think you can do it in a way that is meaningful, but also kind of works towards your goal of maybe a guy that you had in mind. But that'll be the interesting thing, is because right now, all of the numbers that are up in the Sudbury Arena are all guys from the 70s era. So they're all the green jerseys, right? And so when the Burgess family bought the team in the 80s, that's when they switched the colors over to blue. So I think for me personally, it's important, especially to try to engage some of those fans who don't quite have the same vintage as a lot of those guys that are up in the rafters right now, is to get somebody from, the 80s and 90s and maybe even more recently to have their number retired. There's a lot of guys. I think there's some great candidates out there. If you were to look at guys that for example, you'd mentioned, who don't necessarily go on to have, NHL all-star careers, is like Jamie Matthews is a Sudbury Wolves player who'd been with the team his entire junior career. He has the record for the most games played. He's a part of some big moments in Wolves history. So that's a name where it may not necessarily resonate, across the board, but it's somebody who the local fans certainly, loved and appreciated while he was here. The other name that I'd love to see go up would be Jamie Rivers, who obviously did go on to have a pretty good NHL career, and obviously was also a very big part of some big Wolves runs here in the early to mid 90s. So again, not sure where it'll end up and how we end up doing it, but I would love to see the team engage the fans as a way to kind of bring them into the history celebration, and then ultimately have all of that work towards the lead up and retiring that number, and maybe doing some stories around whoever it may be, talking to some of their former teammates and line mates, and kind of setting it up that way so that the stories work towards that culmination on the ice where we send that number up to the rafters.
Yeah. Well, and so let's kind of shift towards the NHL side of things, because there's, obviously every team has a ton of history, whether it be OHL, AHL, NHL. And you talked about kind of working a bit on the King side of things with the Royal Half in there. What does an NHL team do to kind of collect their history? Do they have a team historian? Do they have kind of a process through that, or kind of what happens there?
I wish I could say that there was a more, that they did have more of a process and more teams. I mean, certainly teams do preserve and celebrate their history, but to say that it would be uniform across the board is certainly not the case. I think the league obviously made a huge push to celebrate the centennial in the 2017-18 season, where obviously they produced that 100th anniversary documentary. There was a lot of games that had celebrated the formation of the league in 1917. So I think the league obviously had made a big push. And this is also a league that has always celebrated its history, throughout the years, whatever milestone it may be. The game has a pretty storied tradition. I think the league ultimately tries to take as many opportunities as it can to celebrate that past. But on a team level, it is quite varied. If you were to actually go through all 31 NHL teams, there's really only one team who actually has the official title of having somebody on their website that you can find who has the title of team historian, and that's the Blackhawks. And they had hired Bob Verdi, who was a longtime, beat reporter in Chicago, who had covered the Blackhawks for many, many decades. And they made him the team historian in 2010. The Minnesota Wild have a team curator, Roger Godin. He had previously been in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. I think back in the 80s, he left there and he went on to some other stuff at the federal level. And then he kind of came back into hockey, and he's been the team curator for the Wild. And then the other team that I would kind of say that are in that same grouping are the Red Wings. They actually have somebody who is the director of curation and content activation. And so and I think this will appeal to Nick with Little Caesars opening. I think a lot of the stuff that he's been doing, because his role is relatively recent, I think he's only been there for a couple of years now, is to kind of set up those displays and those exhibits that you have on the concourse so that fans can interact, obviously not only with the past history at Joe Louis, but the team's history going back to the 20s. And so I think those three teams are where you would look to as, they have that job description explicitly put on the website where you can find them. There's other teams, though, that I think obviously have a focus and an emphasis on preserving that history, but it's kind of folded into other elements of somebody's job, right? So the Leafs, for example, another, one of the original six teams. I'm saying the original six with quotation marks, but Mike Fairman is the director of hockey events and alumni, but he's technically the team's unofficial historian. And so, and I think that's because he's been with the team for such a long time. And that is, I think, the tendency for not only the NHL, but a lot of these teams as well, is that people who have been around the team for a long time or have covered the team or have been a part of the organization for a long time are kind of seen as these historians because they obviously have, that institutional or that corporate memory that is very valuable. And it's a great resource, right? But ultimately, I'm in a different boat as a historian because I went to school for as many years as I did to become a historian. So for me, what I see as the duty and job of a historian is I think different from what NHL clubs see as it. And so I think it is pretty varied across the board, but ultimately it is great to see more teams, I think, embracing this, adopting roles that kind of have this built into it, whether it's an archivist or a curator, or again, even folding it into other portfolios is great. Again, I write for the Kings, and they brought me in to write specifically because of the hockey history angle, right? And so they've been great at really kind of having me come in and celebrate the team's history. They also celebrated it quite well, when they had their 50th anniversary a couple of years ago. But again, this is not a milestone year for the club in terms of anniversaries. But I think them having me in and being able to kind of take these stories from the past as a way to, engage with the fans, whether it's a funny, quirky story or if it's something more meaningful, I think it's just a kind of a great way, to not only kind of keep the focus on what's happening on the ice this season, but also as a callback to fans from previous generations who might remember these stories, and fans many times have never heard of them, right? And so it's a great way to help them feel invested in the product as well, because if you have that history and you have that shared experience, I think that ultimately just enriches your fan experience.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I was just thinking about how, when teams start going on that, downward cycle in terms of talent and on-ice success, like I'm seeing this with the Red Wings right now, and, names like Gordie Howe and Ted Lindsay have been in the news cycle the last little while, but the team is leaning pretty heavily on its history to keep fans engaged. And actually I saw it with the Leafs the last few, before Austin Matthews, that like they're leaning pretty heavily on their history and the nostalgia to keep people feeling like positive about the teams. So I was surprised to hear that the Leafs, it's kind of rolled into another role, especially with how much history. I would have figured that all the original 6 teams had somebody on staff, kind of that was their job to look after that.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, you definitely see like I said, Chicago, Detroit, and I mean Montreal also has Carl Levine, who is their I think he's the director of research and translation. So ultimately, I think that some of that portfolio kind of sits on his desk. But I mean, on the other side of the coin too, I agree with you that it should be something that's more uniform across the board, because in addition to telling these stories and unearthing these little nuggets from the past, like there are also tangible marketing opportunities to digging up some of this stuff, right? Where the team could market that, whether it's merchandise or something else, to kind of bring people back and, potentially come to games as a way to get revenue through the gate. But it's just not something that, you see across the board. I've had other teams that I've reached out to in the past. The Avalanche is one that comes to mind, where I talk to somebody, and, it all depends on who you talk to, right? Because not necessarily everyone's going to have the same perspective, but their reasoning, whoever I talked with, had said that, well, they're too recent to really need a team historian, right? But this is a franchise that had come from Quebec before. They were part of the World Hockey Association. They'd won a few Avco Cups at that time. They obviously had a long history prior to moving to Colorado, and then they won 2 Stanley Cups since. And so, I mean, that doesn't strike me as an example of a team that's too recent. I mean, the Golden Knights, who I also reached out to, and they told me they didn't have plans for a team historian. Sure, year one, you probably don't need somebody like me on staff to document everything, as much as I think that that's important from a budgetary perspective. That's probably not something you have baked in. But again, I think that there are, in addition to the engagement strategy and celebrating the team's heritage and all these things, there are certainly marketing opportunities that go with having somebody be able to say, well, look at this jersey we dug up, or look at, all these things that we can kind of put together, slap it on a t-shirt, have a history night or whatever you want to call it. I think there's all sorts of ways where the historian could add value to the team outside of just simply doing, I think what a historian needs to do is preserving that history and being able to, to engage with it and share it with the fans.
Well, and we saw, the Kings just announced the throwback jerseys that they're going to be doing this year. And personally, I'm a huge fan of, whether it be even a team I'm not certainly a fan of, but just being able to see that history on the ice is such a cool experience.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty excited about that. I didn't stay up late enough on Friday to catch the live updates from the state of the franchise, but I was pretty excited to wake up on Saturday morning to see that they'll be bringing back that 90s heritage jersey. So that's pretty awesome.
It was nice of the Kings to announce news at midnight Eastern time. That was nice of them.
Yeah.
So the book Hockey 365. If someone is not aware, what would they find in a book? Or your book, not just a book. I mean, there's lots of your book, Hockey 365.
Yeah, so Hockey 365, as the name implies, is actually 365 hockey history stories, one for every day of the year. I always say that, and then I always add the caveat that there are actually 366 because I did want to account for leap years. So you will find a story on February 29th, which was actually when Gordie Howe scored his 800th career goal. So I just, by stroke of luck, there happened to be a significant thing that happened on a leap day or a leap year day. I don't know how to call that. But anyway, you'll find 366 stories. They kind of span, they predate the NHL, but for the most part, it is history that is tied to the formation of the NHL from 1917 onwards. And so you've got a smattering of stories from across the board, all sorts of different stories. Again, today, the story that I have for September 2nd, 1972 is the first game in the Summit Series. And then you'll find some international stories like that. And then which is a callback to your, I think your most recent episode. And then all sorts of different things as well. So I try to also be careful not to make it too overly, like Gretzky 365 or Bobby Orr 365, which I certainly think you could do. And there are quite a few Bobby Orr Gretzky stories, but I tried to spread the ice time around, so to speak, so that, you shine a light on some other stories that may not get as much coverage as, the day that Gretzky scored his 894th career goal, which is, again, a huge thing, but it's not a story that I have in the book because I kind of covered it in different ways. So that's a book. If you haven't checked it out, I would recommend it. I'd appreciate it. If you want more hockey history, it's each story is one page, so it's an easy read. Everyone likes to tell me that it's a good bathroom reader, and I won't disagree with them, because if you want to throw it up on the back of the toilet, go for it. I will welcome that.
I mean, that's where mine is.
There you go.
So do you have a favorite story from that book that you kind of like, one that you were, as you were putting them together, kind of like an unexpected, kind of, you mentioned there's the milestones kind of things, but something that kind of surprised you that you came across?
There was always, like I think there was quite a few that surprised me just kind of going back and doing the research. One that comes to mind, there was a game when Gump Worsley came to New York and he got egged by a fan. And, he left the game and kind of shrugged it off afterwards that, he didn't know it was an egg until he felt the yolk running down the side of his face. And he kind of played it off as it wasn't a big deal. But he was mildly concussed and he didn't play again for 3 weeks. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those bizarre stories about the Gumper getting egged. And I mean, it's obviously a pretty innocuous moment in hockey history. There's no major significance to that game other than the fact that, this idiot fan came to the game with a bag of eggs and decided to try, throw him at the goalie. But otherwise, I mean, for me, I think the one story that I always think about in the writing process for the book was that Austin Matthews' debut for me was a fun one to write about because I injected a little bit of personal history into that. So my daughter was born 2 weeks before that game. So that was the first game that her and I watched. Well, she slept. I watched it. And my wife was there too. And, my wife just kept saying, like, did he score another one? Like, how many is this? And we were counting. And, for me, it was just kind of cool to have that first moment with Zoe where, as much as she's not obviously watching the game, she was wearing Maple Leafs pajamas. And, I got to experience, a historic moment in team and league history and the whole family was there. Right. So that's one where that was kind of special for me to write about because I did kind of step out of the usual narrative where I'm just kind of focusing on the player. And I did include the fact that this is what I was doing. I was at home on the couch with my newborn and my wife. And again, I think that's for Leafs fans anyway, that, they all kind of have that same where were you when this happened. Right. And so I think that that's kind of fun when you talk to people is when you look at any historical moment, whether it's Austin Matthews scoring 4 goals or I'm just trying to think, or the Summit Series, for example, people talk about where they were when that happened, or do you remember what you were doing when that happened? And so that's always fun to hear about where people were and what they were up to.
And do these stories just kind of tie into the NHL? Or I know you mentioned like the Summit Series, like, is there other, like, would you cover something like the Golden Goal?
I don't have the Golden Goal in there, but I do have some other stories from the Olympics. I didn't do the 1980 Olympics with Team USA winning that one, but I did, I think the 68 Olympics, and I did some other international tournaments. There was one international tournament where I think it was 1947. It was the World's, 1949. And Canada's represented, like Team Canada went to that tournament, but the team was represented by the Sudbury Wolves team at the time, which was like a senior men's team. And so they went over and they beat Denmark 47-0, which at the time was the biggest lopsided, victory in international hockey history, right? So there's some weird things like that where you may not otherwise know that. And then I kind of use that to talk about other blowouts in international hockey history. So for the most part, I would say it's heavily focused on NHL history, but there are a few outliers that you'll have, from before the league was formed. I have something in there about the league's, the first indoor hockey game in Montreal in 1875. And so.
That's awesome. So I know we've had you for like half hour and that's more time than I had promised you, but I do have to ask, since we have such a big Leafs fan on, and you can base your answer either on historical precedent or just gut feeling, what is going to happen with Mitch Marner?
Oh, that's the fun question that nobody wants to answer, right? That's like, I had a tweet the other day that was all of the RFAs that are still unsigned, right? And so as we're recording this podcast, that list remains unchanged.
Oh God.
It's
been a rough summer.
Yeah. I think he signs. I think there's a holding pattern right now to see what the PA does with their option on the collective agreement coming up on the 15th, but I don't know what the number was. I remember that I think I did like an Ask Me Anything of months back when my car broke down. And I think at the time I had said to somebody that he was going to do, 10.3469. So I'll stick with that. And we'll say, let's say, I can't remember the years that he wants, right? So let's say 7.
All right. Noted. I've written that down. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, be sure to yell at me when it's obviously nowhere near that, or if he sits out the season.
Oh God, let's hope not.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all I got, Carl.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thanks, Mike, for coming on. If you want to find the book, obviously, you can find it online anywhere you can find books. But Mike, where would you like to send people to?
Well, I would send you to my Twitter account first because that's where all the shameless promotion happens. So if you want to find some stuff about the book, you can find it there. That's where you also find all of my Kings writing, and that's obviously where I do the Sudbury Wolves stuff too. But otherwise, if you just want to go find the book and you don't have Twitter, you don't want to follow me on Twitter, you can pick up the book at any place you like to buy books, whether that's at Indigo or your local bookstores or online at Amazon or wherever else you like to buy books online. But those are the go-tos for me.
Well, also, first of all, your Twitter account is like a Twitter version of the book because you have the best on this day posts out there when it comes to hockey history. Well, second of all, Carl, we're going to give away a copy of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. That's a good idea.
So and I'll sign it.
If you want to do that, you sign it, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely.
A Mike Commito signed Hockey 365.
One of a kind, Mike Commito signed book.
For your hockey museum.
Head to our Twitter. So go follow Mike at Mike Commito, Commito. Go do that. And then head over to ours. There'll be a pinned tweet with the episode description, kind of saying, hey, Mike was on. Give that a retweet so that more people can find out that Mike was on, listen to the great stuff, find out about the book, go buy the book. And one of you who retweet it will be randomly selected to get a copy yourselves. So do you want to announce that on the show next week?
Yeah, I think that works.
All right. So next week on the show, we'll be handing out that book. You have 1 week to do it. And if you lose, everyone who retweets it should also just go buy the book.
That works for me. I like that idea.
So Mike, thank you so much for coming on. Enjoy the season with it getting started up. Have the Wolves opened camp yet?
Yeah, we've started a couple preseason games now. So I think the first home game will be in a few weeks on September 27th. So I will be in the building for that game, and obviously following what the team does before that. So it should be another fun year.
Looking forward to more of those Wolves shooting across.
Oh yeah, now everyone should go see a Wolves game, and you see it in person because you have to experience it in person. It's quite unlike anything you've seen.
Thanks again to Mike for coming on. That was a ton of fun. Shocking to me how, even though teams put such an emphasis on history, like on the ice and during pregame stuff and all that kind of thing, not that much investment in history, and it's kind of a shame.
It's weird, right? You'd think, like we try to go to a lot of games in different arenas, and the amount of history that's up on the walls in every arena, pictures and statues, and I would have thought somebody would be looking after that, but
I guess not. But we do have people like Mike who are doing that and are taking that time and actually have that focus and that history and know-how on how to do it well. So
yeah, one thing I thought was interesting about what he was saying was, I always thought about a historian as someone who would look at the past and try and preserve it. It never really occurred to me how you'd have to kind of anticipate the present and the future to see what is going to be interesting in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to put that current context around it, right? Because like kind of the Gump Worsley story of like an egg to the face. It's not anything that's changed the world, right? It's not like there's a new like egg policy all around the league, which there for sure would be today. Like if someone did that, if someone brought eggs into an arena, we'd be like, all right, I know we've got metal detectors in every rink, but you're all getting pat downs because you might have eggs in those pants.
Can you imagine being patted down with eggs in your pants?
Just like and now be
egged yourself.
Yeah, it becomes the most aggressive pat downs, right? They're just like hard palming, just like smacking you. Is there eggs in here?
It's your punishment for bringing eggs.
You find out the hard way. Yeah.
Yeah.
You thought an octopus wrapped around your stomach was bad. This is worse.
What I took away from that story is that an egg being thrown at your head could give you a concussion.
Yeah, we should, for the sake of science, we should probably test that.
Probably.
I'm doing a deep dive when we finish this show.
Okay.
Any results will be published on our social media. That's
excellent. I will need to see that.
As well, we'll also we'll find a video of the Sudbury Wolf coming across.
I need to see that thing.
Yeah, it's good.
What a strange.
That was literally Like there was one Sudbury Wolf thing I wanted to talk with Mike about, and that was that. So I'm very glad he brought it up.
Oh, that was the creepy wolf thing you were talking about earlier.
That was the creepy wolf thing, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. Make sure to enter our contest, which all it takes is just one click of a button. You're already on the social media. Click the retweet, and we're going to hand out a book next week. So, our Twitter, for those we didn't mention it on the interview, but our Twitter is at Fourth Line Podcast. You should head over there, do that, retweet the official link. Is going to be pinned. It'll be there. It'll be great. Super easy. Do that. Head to the AlbertaPodcastNetwork.com. It's actually just AlbertaPodcastNetwork.com. I love shoving the in front of it.
Could be very dangerous, Carl.
Anyways, I did that in the interview. I called it like a book. It's like, no, it's just like it's your book.
Yeah.
Prefixes and like those little words, they trip me up sometimes. Who knew? Nice. Head to AlbertaPodcastNetwork.com where you will find so many great things. We've got new shows on the network, and a lot of shows that like maybe took the summer off. Some shows that are not sports related will take the summer off. Some of us that are sports related and are not covering summer sports also don't take the summer off for some reason. So, we're going still. They're coming back from their summer vacations. So lots of great things there. There's going to be a ton of great content coming out. AlbertaPodcastNetwork.com. You can find all your different categories that you want. The fourthlinepodcast.com. We started our 31 in 31 series looking at each team a different day, looking at previews. The great writing team we have over there is putting those out. And honestly, it is some of the greatest writing I've ever seen. And one thing that I love is we have every article. We have a similar format for every one. Today, the Coyotes one came out. So this is our second one. You can now see this. We talk about new players in, the odds to win the division. Would you put money on those odds? Kind of some of the keys to the game. And the most important question of all, if that team was an animal, which animal would they be?
So I'm going to guess the Coyotes would be a rabbit.
Ooh, that would have been a good call. The Coyotes, well, I'll figure it out here. I forget what they were. They're very, very good at work by the writers coming up with those. Mike Laybourne wrote today's, and the Coyotes would be?
Drum roll.
A coyote. Said they sat
Probably
out there.
Should have expected that.
Yeah. A lot of them have not. Like I know one team that shall not be named yet is a lemming.
Okay. That's fun.
Why? But he said, Coyotes sat out in the desert, not bothering too many folks, just getting on. Adapting to whatever situation arises. Coyotes are opportunistic and will eat up whatever comes their way. Rabbits, fish, carrion, marrying hostess contract, insects, etc.
That's great. So, Coyotes howling at the moon and no one's paying attention.
Arizona Coyotes, yeah. So there we go. Until next week, we'll be back. Training camps will be open. We'll start to do some previews, kind of recap some of what's happened in this. Or maybe we should talk about some RFAs next week if they don't sign. Are they going to sign?
Oh, God, I have no idea. Well, they should sign.
Maybe next week if they don't sign, we'll talk about that. We'll get into that. Hopefully they sign. We can talk about that. So
either way, next week we're talking about RFAs.
Either we're talking about all of them signing or the fact that none of them have. And maybe we'll do a deeper dive than just Mitch Marner. Because I think that's worth looking at.
I would agree.
All right. See you next week.
It's time for us to wrap up another Fourth Line show. I know what you're thinking. You don't want us to go. I need to see this creepy dead wolf. But now I'm in trouble because nothing rhymes with wolf.